You have been told that emotional intelligence is about managing your reactions, reading the room, and knowing what to say. But there is a reason you still feel confused by people, and a reason you still react in ways you cannot explain. Emotional intelligence is not what they told you it was. It is not a soft skill you develop through weekend workshops or by memorizing communication techniques. It is the architecture of self-awareness itself. And most of what you believe about your emotions is shaped by material you have never consciously examined. When someone triggers you, you believe the reaction belongs to the situation. You believe they said something offensive, or crossed a boundary, or misunderstood you. And sometimes that is true. But more often, what you are experiencing is not a response to them at all. It is a response to something inside you that their behavior has illuminated. Carl Jung called this projection, and it is one of the most fundamental mechanisms of the psyche. You do not see people as they are. You see them through the filter of your own unconscious material. The qualities you despise in others, the behaviors that make you irrationally angry, the traits you find yourself obsessing over, they are reflections of the parts of yourself you have refused to acknowledge. This is not metaphorical. It is structural. The psyche does not tolerate disowned material well. When you reject a part of yourself, we decide that a certain emotion or desire or impulse is unacceptable. It does not disappear. It descends into what Jung called the shadow, the reservoir of everything your conscious identity cannot afford to claim. And from that hidden place, it continues to operate. It shapes your perceptions. It drives your reactions. It determines who you are drawn to and who you avoid. The shadow does not go away because you refuse to look at it. It simply becomes unconscious, and therefore more powerful. People who pride themselves on emotional intelligence often have the most rigid personas. The persona is the mask you wear in public, the version of yourself you have constructed to meet social expectations. It is polite, measured, appropriate. It knows when to smile and when to nod. It has learned the language of empathy and the performance of care. But the persona is not you. It is a protective structure, and the more investment you have in maintaining it, the more you are suppressing. Jung warned that over-identification with the persona leads to a split, a growing distance between who you appear to be and who you actually are. And that distance creates suffering. You feel it when you are alone. The exhaustion of performing. The sense that no one really knows you. The suspicion that if they did, they would be disappointed. This is not a personal failure. This is what happens when emotional intelligence is taught as impression management instead of inner excavation. You have been trained to control your external behavior without ever addressing the internal forces that generate it. And so you become skilled at appearing emotionally intelligent while remaining fundamentally disconnected from your own psyche. The problem deepens when you encounter someone who does not conform to your projections. They refuse the role you have unconsciously assigned them. They do not react the way you expected. And suddenly, you are confused. You feel destabilized. You may even feel betrayed, though they have done nothing wrong. This is because you were never actually relating to them. You were relating to an image, a construction built from your own unconscious assumptions. Jung understood that true emotional intelligence requires the painful work of distinguishing between what is actually happening and what you are projecting onto what is happening. Most people avoid this work. It is easier to believe that your perceptions are accurate, that your emotional reactions are justified, that the problem is always external. But every time you react disproportionately to a situation, every time you find yourself caught in a pattern you cannot break, every time you are surprised by your own behavior, these are signals from the unconscious. They are invitations to look deeper. And if you refuse the invitation, the pattern repeats. The same conflicts arise in different relationships. The same triggers reappear in different contexts. You begin to notice that wherever you go, the same problems follow you. This is the psyche attempting to bring unconscious material into awareness. Jung called the process of integrating this material individuation. It is the central task of the second half of life, though most people never begin it. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not about becoming a better version of the persona. It is about becoming whole, which means acknowledging the parts of yourself you have spent years denying. The angry part, the selfish part, the frightened, envious, lustful, cruel part. These are not aberrations. They are aspects of the human psyche, and they exist in you whether you admit it or not. The question is whether you will relate to them consciously or allow them to operate in the dark. When you begin to integrate the shadow, something shifts in your perception of others. The qualities that once enraged you become less triggering. Not because you have learned to tolerate them, but because you have recognized them in yourself. You stop needing other people to be different. You stop demanding that they conform to your expectations. This is not detachment. It is clarity. You are no longer viewing them through the distortion of your own unexamined material. You are seeing them more accurately, which means you are also seeing yourself more accurately. This is what emotional intelligence actually is. Not the ability to manipulate your reactions or decode social cues, but the capacity to remain present to the full complexity of your inner world. To feel anger without being consumed by it. To notice envy without acting on it. To recognize fear without being controlled by it. This requires a level of self-awareness that most people never approach, because it requires admitting that you are not who you thought you were. It requires letting go of the idealized self-image. It's the story you tell about your own goodness, your own rationality, your own emotional sophistication. And it requires sitting with the discomfort of realizing how much of your life has been shaped by forces you did not understand. Jung believed that the psyche is self-regulating. It moves toward wholeness naturally, if you allow it. But most people resist. They cling to the persona. They project their shadow onto others. They build elaborate defenses to avoid confronting the unconscious. And in doing so, they remain emotionally undeveloped. No matter how skilled they become at reading social situations or managing their outward behavior. True emotional intelligence is not a performance. It is an internal state of integration, where the conscious and unconscious are in dialogue rather than in conflict. This changes how you move through the world. When you are no longer defending against your own shadow, you stop perceiving threats where none exist. When you are no longer over-identified with the persona, you stop needing validation from others. When you understand projection, you stop taking things personally. These are not skills you can learn from a book or a seminar. They are the natural byproducts of psychological work, of descending into the parts of yourself you have avoided and bringing them into conscious relationship. People will notice the change, though they may not understand it. You will seem less reactive, less defensive, less needy. But it is not because you have learned to control yourself. It is because there is less unconscious material driving your behavior. You have made room inside yourself for complexity, for contradiction, for the full range of human emotion. And that internal spaciousness translates into a different quality of presence. Jung warned that this process is not comfortable. The descent into the unconscious involves confronting material that your ego has spent years protecting you from. Shame, grief, rage, vulnerability, these are not abstractions. They are lived experiences, and they will surface as you dismantle the defenses that have kept them buried. But on the other side of that confrontation is something irreplaceable. A sense of solidity. A kind of inner authority that does not depend on external approval. The ability to meet life as it is, rather than as you wish it to be. This is why manipulation fails. Why people who rely on charm and social intelligence eventually exhaust themselves. Why relationships built on performance always collapse under their own weight. Without the foundation of self-awareness, without the integration of shadow material, there is no stability. You are constantly adjusting, constantly performing, constantly afraid that someone will see through the mask. It requires too much energy to maintain. Silence becomes a form of power when you are no longer afraid of what it will reveal. Most people fill silence because they cannot tolerate what emerges in the absence of distraction. Thoughts they have been avoiding. Feelings they have been suppressing. The gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. But when you have done the work of integration, silence is not threatening. It is clarifying. You do not need to explain yourself or justify yourself or convince anyone of your worth. You are no longer performing for an audience. You are simply present. Others will react to this. Some will be drawn to it, sensing a quality of authenticity they have not encountered elsewhere. Others will be unsettled by it because your refusal to perform exposes their own performance. This is projection in reverse. Your groundedness becomes a mirror, reflecting back to them the parts of themselves they are avoiding. And they will not thank you for it. They will call you cold or distant or arrogant. But what they are actually experiencing is the discomfort of their own unconscious. Material being activated, Jung understood that individuation is often a lonely process. As you move toward wholeness, you will outgrow certain relationships. Not because you are better than others, but because you are no longer willing to participate in the dynamics that once defined those connections. You will stop accommodating projections. You will stop pretending to be smaller or simpler than you are. You will stop sacrificing your inner truth for external harmony. And some people will not forgive you for that. They will prefer the version of you that served their needs, even if that version was unsustainable. But there is a different kind of relationship available on the other side of this work. Connections built on reality rather than projection. Intimacy that does not require you to hide. This is not idealistic. It is structural. When two people have done the work of integrating their shadow material, they are no longer unconsciously using each other to avoid themselves. They can meet as whole individuals with all the missenses and contradiction that entails. And that kind of meeting is rare because most people never do the work. Emotional intelligence, in the Jungian sense, is not about control. It is about relationship. Relationship with your anger, your fear, your desire, your shame. When those parts are no longer exiled to the unconscious, when they are brought into awareness and integrated into the totality of your being, you become capable of a different kind of presence. Not the polished, managed presence of the persona, but the grounded, unflinching presence of someone who has confronted their own depths and survived. This is the work that no one wants to do, because it offers no shortcuts and no guarantees. It does not make you more likable or more successful in any conventional sense. It does not give you power over others. What it gives you is sovereignty over yourself, the ability to stand in your own experience without needing to escape it, numb it, or project it onto someone else. And that sovereignty changes everything. It changes how you interpret conflict. It changes what you need from others. It changes what you are willing to tolerate and what you are willing to walk away from. Jung spent his life exploring the terrain of the unconscious. And what he found was not a repository of pathology, but a source of untapped potential. The shadow contains not only your rejected flaws, but your rejected strengths. The qualities you were taught to suppress because they did not fit your family system or your cultural conditioning. Your anger might also be your capacity for healthy boundaries. Your sadness might also be your depth of empathy. Your fear might also be your instinct for self-preservation. When you reclaim these parts of yourself, you are not becoming more flawed. You are becoming more complete. Most of what passes for emotional intelligence in contemporary culture is social conditioning dressed up as psychological insight. It teaches you to read cues, to anticipate needs, to smooth over tension. And those are useful skills. But they are not the same as self-knowledge. They are strategies for navigating a world where authenticity is punished and performance is rewarded. And if that is all you develop, you will spend your life exhausted, maintaining a version of yourself that was never real to begin with. The psyche does not care about your social success. It cares about wholeness. And it will continue to send you signals, create symptoms, generate crises until you pay attention. The recurring dream, the inexplicable anxiety, the relationship pattern you cannot escape. These are not punishments. They are communications from the unconscious, and they will persist until you are willing to listen. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's natural drive toward integration and balance. You can resist it, but you cannot stop it. The question is whether you will participate consciously or be dragged through the process unconsciously. When you finally stop resisting, when you turn toward the material you have been avoiding, something remarkable happens. The energy you were using to maintain the split becomes available for other things. Creativity, presence, connection. You stop feeling like you are living at half capacity because you are no longer dividing yourself between what is acceptable and what must be hidden. You are no longer at war with yourself. And that internal peace is not the peace of resolution or closure. It is the peace of integration, where opposites are held in tension rather than collapsed into false simplicity. This is what emotional intelligence looks like, when it is rooted in psychological reality rather than social performance. It is messy. It is uncomfortable. It requires you to admit that you do not know yourself as well as you thought, that the people you have judged harshly are mirrors of your own disowned qualities, that the life you have built may be serving your persona more than your actual self. And none of that is easy to acknowledge. But on the other side of that acknowledgement is a kind of freedom that cannot be found any other way. The freedom to be exactly who you are without apology or performance. The freedom to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. Jung believed that this was the central task of human development. And that most people die without completing it. Not because they lack intelligence or willpower, but because they lack the courage to face what the process demands. It demands that you give up the illusion of control, that you stop pretending you are better than you are, that you allow the unconscious to speak even when what it says contradicts everything you believe about yourself. And that is terrifying, because it means dismantling the structure you have used to make sense of your life. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is a life spent managing appearances, controlling reactions, avoiding depth. A life where you are always performing, always adjusting, always one step removed from your actual experience. And no amount of emotional intelligence training will fix that, because the problem is not a lack of skill. It is a lack of self-knowledge. It is the refusal to descend into the unconscious and retrieve the parts of yourself you left behind. When you do that work, When you integrate what you have rejected, you do not become perfect. You become real. And real is more valuable than perfect because real can be trusted. People sense it even if they cannot articulate it. They sense that you are not hiding, not performing, not pretending. And that creates a different kind of safety, a different kind of intimacy. The kind that does not require you to be anything other than what you are. That is the gift of integration. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but authenticity. Not the absence of conflict, but the capacity to hold it without collapsing. Jung understood that the psyche is vast, and that consciousness is only a small part of it. Most of what drives your behavior is outside your awareness. And as long as it remains outside your awareness, it will control you. Emotional intelligence is not about mastering your emotions. It is about bringing the unconscious into dialogue with the conscious, so that you are no longer at the mercy of forces you do not understand. That is the work. And it is the work of a lifetime, because the unconscious is inexhaustible. There is always more to discover, more to integrate, more to understand. But each step toward wholeness is also a step toward freedom. The freedom to live without pretense. The freedom to relate without projection. The freedom to be fully, undividedly yourself. And that is worth everything.